Hello, good morning. Welcome to Vero's live stream. Today, I have a very special guest with me, my friend, my long term client, Paul Oberdorfer. He's the city manager at the city of Piqua, Ohio. I hope I said that right, Paul. Uh,
Yep.
and I'm thrilled to have you. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, AV. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so Paul and I know each other since
2014.
2003,
Yeah.
14 or something like that,
14.
maybe even earlier than that, from our time in Ohio, my time in Ohio. And we've remained uh, friends, and I've been able to provide some value and learn a lot from Paul over the years. Um, and so today we're talking about the perils of mixing, what? Potion mixing perils. So keeping up with our spooky theme for Halloween, and talking about the dark arts of customization. And it's a dirty word for especially people like us that implement software. And I know for city managers, and Paul, you've grown up through the ranks and you've seen it all. When I met you, you were deputy public works director at the city of Green. No,
Yep.
was that?
Yep.
Yeah,
That was in green.
Green.
Yeah.
And then it's been fascinating to see your rise, because we need more people like you in city management. So great work. And I want to start with when you've done work with the state also, right? You've worked at ODOT, and you've seen systems from all different sides, and you've actually published some work on how best to run organizations like that with your engineering background. So talk to us a little bit about where you started and how you're in the city manager's role now.
Sure, sure. So I started back in early 90s as a co-op student. Went to the Ohio Department of Transportation, wound up at District 4, and I did a couple of years of co-oping with them and hired on permanently in their bridge engineering office. I was doing drafting and bridge maintenance plans at that time on a 286 with AutoCAD monochrome monitor. It was really kind of the big thing back then to get off of doing manual drafting. And just over my career there, I did several years in the bridge engineering office and a decade out in construction, doing construction management for heavy highway, using the state systems that have been in place since the 70s, using those archaic flat databases to, help put things through the pay application process. After I was done out in the field, I went in and did facilities management for District 4 ODOT for about 6 years. More of the same thing, using the same antiquated systems and processes that had been in place for decades, but really optimizing things from a operation standpoint, making the best of what we had and really employing it as efficiently as we could. At some point, 2007, 2008, with the economics, the way they basically laid themselves out, I said, well, maybe it's not a bad thing I go to local government and try something different. So in 2010, I landed at the city of Green as deputy public service director, and I spent 6 years there, well, 7 years there, and eventually was the director of public service. And during that time, that's when you and I started to get involved in, optimization and efficiency and looking at organizational development and all of those things. I just happened upon a report that you had done, and I was really interested in how we could apply those things to our organization to get rid of all this paper and really streamline our operations, from the front line, and collect the data that really had implications for our organization. Quickly after that, I left there and went to the city of Charlottesville for 4 years. I was public works director, 2017, deputy city manager. Had a great experience there, and we went through implementation or RFP and vendor selection on implementation of a permitting system. I left there to come back to Ohio for the opportunity to be a city manager in Western Ohio, a small town, 20,000, light manufacturing primarily, but with a lot of agriculture around us. It's a really great place to be.
It is.
So I've been here about 3 years, and I had Avero come in and do an IT assessment to get us our legs under our body and figure out where we needed to go. And so we've embarked on that path since.
Yeah, you're a constant change master, I think, because you've done so much. Even thinking back to the city of Green, we got some stuff done, and then you went to Charlottesville, and we focused on the process redesign of the permitting system there, one of your departments, and then it bled into work orders and asset management. Um, and I think you're one of the few people I know that really get this at a deep level. That no matter what system you have, it's not going to work if you haven't studied processes, if you haven't redesigned them and straightened the pipes. Where did you uh, come to that conclusion and understanding? Was it pretty early in your career?
Yeah, I think it really comes out of the fact that government's really good at creating data and archiving data, but not very good at utilizing it, right?
Hmm.
So um, along my career, it's like you can find it if you dig deep and if you have the right tools, but you can't really make sense of all those dots and connecting the dots. And I guess I've been fortunate that over my career, I've figured out where those connection points need to be made. And a lot of it had to go back with the challenges of elected officials and trying to demonstrate something very complex, be it the budget, down to how do we demonstrate the value of their resource, be it capital resource, human capital, and how do we connect that to an outcome. And so, it seems that government's very good at, having numbers that demonstrate basically what the number is and a narrative that talks about the number, but they don't connect the two in a way that's meaningful that somebody can absorb very quickly, even at a very high level, a dashboard level. And dealing with elected officials, they have a lot of other things on their mind, and they have about 7 minutes to really understand the point you're getting to.
Hmm.
So we tried to take all of that high level information and just basically distill it into something that would be, uh, I think, receptive to any elected official of any capacity.
Yeah. And so, in your latest role as city manager, you've been able to bring all of these experiences and learnings from your previous jobs um, into the position. So I know we did an IT strategic plan a couple of years ago. Was it last year? Was last year?
Yeah, it was last
And
year.
yeah, and we've when we were working together at Charlottesville, the pressure was on to replace the existing system that wasn't working. I mean, we studied 150 different processes, mapped them out, and came to the conclusion that you're doing things differently in different buildings, and it's just inefficient, and the system you had wasn't working for the permitting process.
Correct.
But it had tentacles into public works, into finance, into asset management. And you would be, people might think that you need a custom solution, one thing that does it all for you, and you have to tell the vendor exactly what you need and they'll build it for you. And at that time, the system, the main ERP the city was using was SAP, and it had been cobbled together, right, based on customizations that no one else understood how to keep up
Right.
with it.
Right. And I think that's kind of the parable about all this is when you implement something in 2007, without continuous updating, that's why I like software as a service. I would rather pay as I go and have the most effective security and all the updates, and then not make those huge capital investments, every 7 or 8 years or whatever it
Mhm.
may be. When they let a system go a decade, and they're basically using duct tape and baling wire to keep it together, it becomes problematic because then you have three people in IT that are working on the custom code to keep things functioning,
Yeah.
but nobody else understands how that operates. And so they're building workarounds, be it within the system, in that case, SAP, or using third party software, things that were maybe subscription services, and creating things outside the realm of that ERP to actually solve the problems that they have that the ERP should be doing for them.
Right. And it's also easy to fall into the trap of there's nothing out there that can do this for us, because you become so specialized and your processes are so unique that you can't budge from that, and then you start seeking customization. And to your point, you need, you know, it has such ramifications on the organization. Now you need to relook at your staffing in IT. You need to
Mhm.
hire developers, you need to hire people on staff that can handle the infrastructure. But instead, could you have some give on your processes so that you can get something off the shelf? And then customization again is a bad word, but configuration isn't, right? You need to really define what that means to you and have the vendor configure the system.
Yep.
What's been your past experience? Let's talk about just, Charlottesville, as you walk in as the new public works director and you have systems on hand. How did you handle those discussions with, um, I guess, IT at the time?
Well, so being new, IT is always very resistant
Yeah.
and letting you see behind the door, right? Uh, Fortunately for me, coming in as a public works director and having facilities um, underneath my management, we had basically a relationship, albeit maybe contentious at times. Facilities had to work with IT, and IT had to work with facilities. So over the first 6 months, you start to build relationships and chisel away at those rough edges of the folks that don't want you to see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it takes, coffee, breakfast, lunch, donuts, bribery of all kinds of sorts to really get their walls to come down. But we did establish a really good team, and it was a networking
Hmm.
team that solved problems, but that IT had, that facilities could aid them in solving the problem. And then conversely, we started to draw them back into the issues that we had. And that was like the first, for me, the first, I guess, way that we found a talent network model that was really going to be instrumental in solving our issues,
Hmm.
because it takes that group of technical experts, managers, and people that are responsible for it to be able to solve the problem. And so, building that relationship early on and not trying to force a square peg in a round hole and make them upset, because it would just shut it down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's where the success came from.
Well, and I've also, you hit on a good point. You had the group that you weren't afraid to promote people, to give them more responsibility and just bring them up, and take charge of difficult problems. And I know this is going away from the topic, but it's important because it's those things that make or break a large scale modernization effort fail,
Mhm.
right? You need the right people in the right places, uh, that have the same vision as you do and that understand that technology isn't the end all. It's just the tool. At the
Right.
end of the day, the crux of this matter is still people and organization.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and it goes back to the people that are there during the implementation. That's a snapshot in time of the process that is a creation of what they needed and what they envisioned at that particular moment. And that could be based on the environment, the tools at hand, vendor relations. There's a lot of things that really go into that, that do make it that particular moment at that particular time. And I think, continuous improvement is very critical, to continue to look at, even post implementation, after your year down the road of go live, things are working wonderfully. I still think you need to have that group of people, albeit it could be different players because people come and go,
Yeah.
that go back and once a year take a look at the business processes to say, hey, well, why are we still doing this and making copies and sending it over to the city manager's office when he just puts it in the trash or in recycle because he doesn't like paper, right? So, there's always those changes and nuances that need to be done. But moreover, I look at it as an opportunity to create efficiency in government that yields better, faster, and more services, right? So if you look at our bottom line, and government's really bad about understanding what overhead expenditures are. If you can use the ERP system and continuously improve it, you should be able to drive down your overhead to a point where instead of 12%, or I'm just making a number up, 15% cost of overhead, if you can bring that down to 10% and reinvest that 5% back into the community for better, faster, newer services, whatever that may be, and demonstrate it to the public in a way that's meaningful, then that takes you to the next level of reputation with the community and sophistication as well.
Yeah, and again, it's not the building blocks is the vision and how you organize this thing at the people level.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's been your experience? Because having known you for a while, you're very cerebral, intellectual. Not everyone around you can be that at the same time. So, how do you translate all of these, um, vision statements and your clear vision into something that people at the staff level can understand and take on?
Well, for me, it started actually in January 21 when I got here. I indoctrinated my leadership team. So I basically spent an hour and a half with a presentation about how my brain operates and how my vision and my philosophy rolls out into my day-to-day operations. And so um, they were a little taken back because it's a lot to unload on somebody who's like, hey, this is how I think.
Yeah.
But that was like an introduction so that when I had one-on-ones with them biweekly over the next year, that we could start to have intimate conversations about what did they need to get done and how can I help them be successful in places where they had not been and had limitations. And I think that starting with the leadership team and laying out really, first of all, is understanding that we're public employees and we're public servants and we're here to do something that is a higher calling than just going to work every day.
Hmm.
And trying to build that vision and that responsibility of philosophy into their everyday actions to say, okay, well, it's fine that you've always done it that way every day, but how can we do it better so that we can demonstrate a proficiency to the public that we haven't yet, and then market it and market our success so that they buy into what we do without having reservation. And so working through the leadership team and then down to the front line and having tailgate talks and very similar conversations, but more suited to the audience to say, hey, you guys do outstanding work at the ground level, but I need you to record what you do every day. So that we have a chart of records that states how much material, how much equipment, how much time you spent doing, these particular business processes that are in your portfolio. And it could be operational or programmatic, but either way, let's track your time so that at the end of the year, we can say that we spent X amount of resource in people or in financial resources to get that outcome, and then create a KPI that demonstrates year over year we're actually doing a better job. And just implementing sort of that philosophy over the last 2 years, and then starting with, I hate to say it, but starting with a paper format, we're starting to get them to understand the value in that, because it went from my speech about that to, hey, what are we doing every day, to, hey, now your director is responsible for an annual work plan that is going to coordinate and collaborate with other departments so that when we have the budget, their work plans are an addendum to the budget that demonstrate the connection between the resource and the outcome. And so I think they started to understand the value is like, when I come to work, my director has a year of programs. And then on a weekly basis, my supervisor knows who shows up, what the weather is, and what we'll be doing that day. We record what we do, and it's not the big brothers watching me. It's that at the end of the year, we can say, my gosh, we mowed how many acres of grass in the parks, and
Yeah.
it cost us less than our contractor. That to me is success.
How do you do this in the absence of robust systems that can do this for you? Because I know, um, at least that when you started, you didn't have this. Like you said, paper and pencil.
Right,
It.
right. And it's spreadsheets and, using our current system, Springbrook, which the modules are not highly customized. I don't think the work order section of it was ever really fully developed. And it's really just at a very basic level, not getting down into the weeds too much,
Mhm.
but creating, instead of, all right, you have 20 items in your business process inventory, what are your top 4 programs? And the first year, let's just focus on what you did for those 4 programs. And then as we start to get more sophisticated, we can drill down into, if you think about like turf maintenance versus mowing versus
Yeah.
roadside mowing, and those like nuances. That's down the road conversation. It's getting them comfortable with the fact that as a leadership team, we're here to promote the good deeds that they do every day that people have not understood, or we have failed to market in a way that has a public buy-in to, the fact that they have outstanding employees.
So again, doesn't have anything to do with systems, right? It's systems thinking and design thinking that
Right.
you then overlay the right systems on top, and
Yep.
it's not impossible to do it without the quote unquote right systems.
Right. And you remember back to Charlottesville, we were using Visio
Yeah.
and really just starting to cobble together what makes sense in terms of a business process and how to use Lean Six Sigma to optimize those things and remove all the waste in it and create efficiency. And a lot of it, that buy-in, even early on when I was in Charlottesville, was the fact that people were frustrated that they were doing things that they knew had no value or meaning.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. They At one time the city manager had said, "I need to know how many gallons of water we use in street sweeping." And they're like, "Okay," and "Oh, you don't care how many miles we street sweep?" Or and so they kept track of how many gallons they were using in street sweeping. And I looked at the report and I said, "Well, why are they asking for this?" "Well, two city managers ago," I said, "just stop recording it, okay? It's more important. I'm not, all right, we'll pick up the water on the back end and the material side, but I want to know how many lane miles of street sweeping we're doing, because that's what the public cares about, not how much water we're using."
Yeah, that's a good point, Paul, because you grew up in public works in engineering, and how difficult or easy has it been to make the transition to deputy CM and then city manager? Because I know it includes a big chunk of your responsibility is public works,
Yeah,
but there's so much
and
more.
now I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, there's so much more. Go ahead.
Yeah, it just, for me, it was segueing from operations portfolio, into then having public safety and the programming side of the house. So HR, IT, finance, not much different in terms of overall management strategy, but it's a different environment that, if I look through it through your eyes as a consultant, I start looking at profitability for us is efficiency in terms of how they operate.
Hmm.
And so then it's billable hours, right? And so I want to know from our permitting folks, how long do you spend on plan review? How many hours of inspection are you doing? Over to in fire and EMS, I want to know fire suppression, EMS runs, training, break it down into all those things, public education, events and things like that. And I want to understand better how you operate on a daily basis from a programmatic level. And then, so what we did when I came to the city of Piqua was I created two teams of leadership, and they all kind of operate together. So I have the operations folks that they review each other's budgets and they're helping each other create their annual work plans. And on the other side of the house, I have the programmatic and public safety, because they're more the soft side people, all people oriented type
Yeah.
thing, where they're helping each other identify how can I lay out my year of work and what does that mean for my area and how does it plug into, if you're an internal service, IT, HR, finance, how does that support these other departments without me being over capacity?
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, got an audience question. Given that the situation can vary from organization to another, what general recommendations or niche recommendations can you offer for tackling data archival in customer ERP systems, and what obstacles should companies be aware of? I think the last piece of that question is important. What's the as you go to automate and modernize your systems, and together we've run into many obstacles along the years, right? Which ones do you think are the most important as far as selecting a system and making sure that you're not leaving good data behind in your old system, and how do you make that transition? What's been your experience?
Well, I think a lot of it is looking at the integrity of the data, right? And so um, I could go to my network right now and I could go back to 2003, and it's very scary for me because our knowledge management and our file archiving is not the greatest yet. But what happens is that really relevant? information.
Hmm.
And so, knowing that we're laying out a new ERP currently with a 2025 implementation date, what we're trying to do is streamline our data on the backside to say what is a relevant data set and what is it going to produce for us if we import that data, and if we pay for it, I want to be sure that we're getting the most effective use of that, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to go through now and discern what is critical information, what is information that can be archived for later use. I can give you another another demonstration of things that I've walked into. And you may have seen this. We have the AS400 down in the basement,
Yeah.
DOS base, amber screen, dirty keyboard. It's from 1990, whatever. And it's still down there because, oh, we may have to go down there and look something up, right? The probability of that over time gets more diminished, but yet we still have record retention, requirements that we have to do. So we
Hmm.
have to kind of, I think, there's a crosswalk between our records retention and archiving versus what we're going to be using on a daily basis to be making decisions. And so we're trying to streamline last year, this year, and next year into data sets that are going to be instrumental in the ERP implementation and use,
Hmm.
and spend less time on the archiving and worrying about what we have to have for our records retention.
Yeah. And old data archival is important. You don't have to bring 40 years of data into your new system, right? So, and who knows what's going to happen in the next 2 years as you implement your new ERP system. um, the advent of AI, and we've talked about natural language reporting, and the ease of which will allow you to get the right data at the right time verbally without having to ask someone to write you a report that takes 3 months. I'm really excited for that. I know you
Yeah,
are too.
absolutely.
All right, audience questions. This is getting exciting now for the audience. Uh, Clay Brooks, one of our newest senior consultants. Regarding square pegs and round holes, what are the advantages reshaping the peg by organizing the people to suit the new system versus making a custom shaped ERP? How do the risks and costs of reorg compare to the time and money that could instead be spent on customizing software? I think she's making a case for customization. I don't know.
Well, I have to tell you from my vantage point, and so I've been here near 3 years now. We've gone through quite a few iterations of organizational development and reorganization, and a lot of it is just really taking those buckets of outcomes, right? So if you look at the program areas as a roll up to what the ERP is really going to be running in the background, understanding what those program areas are and how they need to be managed and what it takes from the human capital side of things to manage that is really important. And so we've spent a lot of time with our HR director, the assistant city manager, and myself, basically, and I hate to admit this, but we took magnets on the whiteboard and assigned the departments and the positions, no names, and really shuffled things around multiple times to try to figure out what was the most optimal arrangement to manage each of these areas, because each organization is going to have either more parks and rec, less parks and rec, more
Hmm.
public works. We've got Fort Piqua Plaza, so we have managed services with that and the golf course. So the makeup's going to be a little bit different. And so if you can align those programs with the right amount of management and the right amount of human capital to deal with it on a daily basis, to me, it was starting with that overarching theme of what it does the organization need to function, and then drill down using the ERP into the process level
Yeah.
to then make the assignments through the map to say, these are the touch points that need to be done and are within that lane of that department.
So future casting, I mean, as we consultants call it, visioning, blah blah. It really, again, nail it down in terms of how you want this organization to function, and then the tools will appear, or you'll
Mm.
find them. And something you said, and this is me trying to learn from you, being nimble and ready to change the organization based on the needs or changes externally can also be seen as indecisive leadership. right? But
Mhm.
you and I know that it's required because you don't know how this puzzle fits yet. In your case, it's been 3 years, and I think you're getting closer. Uh,
Mhm.
in our case, I've been at this for 8 years, and it's still the same. It's the parallels are similar. You have to be nimble. How do you strike that balance?
Well, a lot of it is also too, trying to be respectful to the staff. So, um, in terms of when I came here, we have staff that have been at the city of Piqua, and I'm not kidding you, for 33 years that are in
Hmm.
leadership, right? So, while they may be eligible to retire, they're still a value add to the organization. Huge institutional knowledge, relationships, the things that go along with success. So waiting for their time to say, yeah, it's time for me to move on, and I guess respecting that, and then taking their position and looking at it after they vacate it or when they're getting ready to vacate it to reimagine what that really looks like, I think is important. What I found too is, and I hate to admit this, government likes to push the easy button. So in order to pacify people, you find that people are promoted into a rank that they may not need or that they may not function in based on the fact that they squawk, they're unhappy,
Yeah,
they cry the blues, whatever it is, gnash their teeth. And so sometimes weaker management will give in to, fine, you're now the director of engineering, right?
yeah,
But for our organization, we're so small, it's not a director level, it's a support function. And by the way, I'm outsourcing it to a consultant because I can't afford a PE in today's environment. So, it's that kind of a thing that we address in the agility or being nimble as things pop up. We have to really look at the organization and make some really critical decisions. Is it in-house or is it outsourced?
hmm,
And it seems to me that that parallel now with just the way the economy and the employment environment is that these specialties are very hard to fill.
hmm.
Just even a finance director, somebody with a CPA, trying to afford somebody in today's market is just really difficult.
Yeah, and you're not alone. So I completely understand. Um, Kent has a question. Technology can really scare employees because they fear it can expose the weaknesses or skill gaps they may have. How do you help control the perception employees have about ERP products, or I guess any enterprise-wide technology?
Great. I appreciate that question. And that goes back to using paper. And again, I hate to go back in time and I might as well use stone and, carve the 10 commandments on it. But, people are less, I think, afraid of paper is a segue into a system.
Hmm.
And, they have a clipboard and they have a piece of paper and you're talking about, here's the 4 areas of things I do and how many hours a day do I spend on it. And they throw it in their truck and then they go back. And so, I think from a frontline perspective, it's easier to start very broad and say, "Hey, we're just trying to figure this out." And then as time goes on, so now we're 3 years down the road, we've gone from those 4 areas to 20, and now we're adding materials and things like that. Or in the terms of our permitting department, how many hours are you spending on each of the projects? Are the enterprise, excuse me, plan review for enterprise funds or general fund, things of that nature. And I think the very thoughtful step into it is not to make it so that they sit down and feel like they're being analyzed right away as a time study.
Yeah.
And if I was to take my iPad over here and set up Survey 123 and Workforce in ArcGIS and hand it to somebody and say, okay, here's all your forms, go fill it out, I think they would probably have a little bit of reservation about that without understanding behind it and demonstrating for a few
Yeah.
years ahead of that, that at the end of the year, we create this report that talks about how many acres of park we mowed or how many EMS calls we've had, and really demonstrate it in a way that supports the staff so that they feel engaged as being a part of the solution. They
Hmm.
feel at the end of the day, they've really done something. I think that's another thing that I found too is when you go organization to organization, we're very ad hoc and responsive or reactive versus plan and executing on a schedule. And so instead of being unscheduled is 80% and scheduled is 20, we like to flip it around and do 80% scheduled and 20% unscheduled. And that's something new in government, again, because the easy button is
Yeah.
the easy way out.
And these are hard management challenges, right? Because you want people to do those tasks for you, but you're not going to get the best out of them if you don't show them the big picture and give them a problem to solve instead of a task to do.
Hmm.
And I think that's a great way to build capacity within the organization too, because you're now showing them the big picture. As a city manager, here's what I'm responsible for and how this task rolls up to the main responsibility that the council has.
Yep. And that your team did a great job in the sense that when we do the mapping, again, it's the people at the front line that do the work every day.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit up here and profess that I know how to do their job the best. They do it every day. You tell me what it is process wise that makes your job the easiest for you to do, the most accurate, and with the best quality control. And then we'll have the supervisor talk to your group about your group of people that do that job. And then
Mhm.
how does that interconnect to the management and the reporting of that for the director that has oversight of that? And then how does that plug into the bigger system? And so by using the network team model and having all of those groups involved, up front, it eliminates a lot of the things that you don't see, right? So we all have blind spots, and for me, my blind spots are areas that I don't deal with every day. And certainly the person that sees, oh, you better you better submit this report, otherwise our gap accounting is not going to be certified. Well, I don't think of
Yeah.
stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So we want to have all our processes put together in a way that's meaningful, from the most mundane process all the way up to the philosophy of how we want to lead the organization.
So we've talked about processes for what, 10 years now, and I love talking to you about this because you get it. And so that the theory behind that is you study processes, you redesign them, map them out, and you're going to show it to a software vendor and say, make your thing do this for us without customizations. And in my experience, the reality has been, yes, the theory still holds, but our software vendors don't necessarily listen or look at the all of this upfront work we've done, right? It's
Hmm.
like contractors not looking at architecture diagrams. And that's been frustrating. I know you've been through some of that also on your end.
Yes, and I think, through the requirements, both technical and functional requirements in the RFP, that really kind of becomes the divulging point for the vendors as to whether or not they can truly deliver. And through that assessment, you'll have a complete, or you should have a complete understanding if they're going to be able to do what they say that they can
Right.
do. And then if they fail to deliver, you have a contract document that can hold their feet to the fire to make sure that they do what they say they can do. But moreover, I think, from a cost saving or cost containment perspective, we started talking about this years ago. Instead of taking the widget and then having the vendor decide what your organization does and how they do it and how that interacts with their widget, it's better to determine what we do every day and show them, be upfront with it, and say,
Hmm.
hey, here's our 150 pages of mapping. And now you figure out how much programming time that you're going to have in development, software development, to take our concept of how we run our organization, the ERP, and digitize it into this tool that we need. And I think all that work on the front end, while a lot of people don't understand that, just number one, the cost containment with the RFP and select vendor selection on the front end, but the go live time and the loss of capacity for your staff to fix things on the backside, not to mention the loss of reputation with the public while you go through it. And I really love the idea that we're doing this out in front. It helps the organization understand how we operate before we try to digitize. And that's really business 101, is if we
Yeah.
don't know how we do things, that's the first thing we need to understand.
And it's so important that we've had to use it, this documentation created up front, and when clients are trying to get out of bad contracts with vendors, because it becomes your contract compliance tool,
Hmm.
right? The vendors have agreed to do this for a certain
Yep.
amount and signed off on it. And there then tends to be no way out. Um, Paul, do you have any other thoughts, questions?
No, I'm just, it's interesting after 32 years in in public service, like every day I get up and I'm excited because of all the things that are on the horizon with AI and just technology, and the fact that, human capital is the most expensive thing on our budget line.
Yeah.
And so trying to be agile and nimble and find tools that you can take that same person and they can do way more work and be way more effective than just having four people doing 25% of it. And to me, having folks that feel a sense of fulfillment coming to work, and again, being a public servant, we're not making the most money. We're here hopefully for two reasons. One is to serve the public and do something greater than ourselves. But number two is to create for us a local government that supports community development and placemaking, and really creates a place where people want to move and be engaged in the community. So, while we don't have a lot to do with some of those soft skills in the outside of it, creating the framework and the reputation is what draws those people to come here.
That's a great thought, Paul. I wish more people thought of it like you do. And thank you for all you do for city of Piqua. And I know wherever you go, you have the same attitude and commitment. And there's Robert. When can we have Paul back for another episode? He's super smart. Okay.
Thanks, Robert.
All right, Paul. This has been great. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and we'll do this again some other time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Avi.
Thanks.
Take care.